Odds are, if you clicked on this video, you came in doubtful. You read the title, saw the thumbnail, and really are just here to see how ridiculous my claim might be. Or perhaps you enjoy hearing me yap about Tolkien. Regardless, I can almost guarantee that by the end of this video, you'll have a newfound respect and understanding for our furry friend without pants. Although distinctly different in many ways, Winnie the Pooh and Lord of the Rings have several foundational commonalities. Both were authored by British men who fought in World War I. Both follow a group of unique characters who band together to tackle different challenges, and both stories are fantastic examples of British comfort fantasy, which is a genre that predominantly came out of the healing from the First World War. So join me as today we examine the friendships, plot lines, and settings of these two incredible worlds, and find out how the Shire and the 100-Acre Wood might not be so different after all. My name is Gibby, and welcome to Factor Fantasy, a channel where I talk about stuff like this. If you like Harry Potter, I have another channel dedicated to the wizarding world, but over here we focus on all things Tolkien. Before I get into the meat and potatoes of this analysis, I want to of course thank Jason, Joshua, Timothy, Robo Steve, and the rest of my incredible Patreon and YouTube members who help make these videos possible every month. Now sit back, grab a cup of tea, coffee, or whatever you prefer, and enjoy this completely unnecessary but extremely fascinating analysis of Winnie the Pooh and Lord of the Rings. Let's be honest, when you first hear the comparison, it sounds ridiculous. One story features a dark lord trying to cover the lands in a second darkness, the other features a donkey losing his tail. One has the Battle of the Pelennor Fields and Helm's Deep, the other has a game of Pooh Sticks. But in 1978, a science fiction author named Michael Moorcock dropped a bomb on the fantasy community. In his essay, Epic Pooh, he argued that authors like Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, and Richard Adams, who wrote Watership Down, were all guilty of writing corrupted romance. He called their style Anglican Toryism. So what does that mean? Basically, Moorcock believed that these writers were scared of the modern world. He argued that they hated technology, hated cities, and hated the complexity of real life. In his view, The Lord of the Rings wasn't a challenge to the reader, it was a lullaby. He said it was written to soothe and console the middle class, to tell them that everything was going to be okay if they just stayed in their gardens and ignored the changing world. He famously wrote that The Lord of the Rings is Winnie the Pooh posing as an epic. He looked at the Shire with its tea parties and waistcoats, and he saw it as a cowardly self-protection. To him, Bilbo and Frodo weren't heroes. They were just retired colonels, men who wanted to hide from the reality of the 20th century. He called the Shire the Surrey of the mind, basically calling it a boring, rich suburb where nothing bad ever happens. Moorcock's critique is brutal. He essentially is accusing Tolkien of infantilizing his readers. He's saying, you think you're reading a war story, but you're actually reading a bedtime story for babies. But here's where we have to stop and ask a completely different question. Moorcock sees the comfort in these stories as weakness. He sees it as escapism. But what if comfort wasn't a retreat? What if it was a strategy? To understand why two grown men, A.A. Milne and J.R.R. Tolkien, would spend their lives writing about teddy bears and hobbits, we have to look at the world they were trying to escape from. We cannot talk about the 100-Acre Wood or the Shire without talking about the mud, specifically the mud of the Somme. You see, both A.A. Milne and J.R.R. Tolkien belonged to a generation of British men for whom the history of the world was sliced in half. There was before the war, and then there was after the war. Both of these men were writers, scholars, and officers who watched their entire generation get fed into the meat grinder. A.A. Milne, the creator of Pooh, served as a signals officer during World War I. Now, being a signals officer sounds technical and like you're in an office, but it meant he was right there in the chaos, trying to keep up the lines of communication while the world exploded around him. Milne didn't write the gritty, angry poetry of Siegfried Sassoon or Wilfred Owen, but the trauma went just as deep. His experience was visceral. After the war, Milne was, to put it lightly, shell-shocked. His psychological state was characterized by a desperate, almost biological need to reclaim the innocence that had been blown to pieces on the Western Front. It is a critical commonplace to look at the Pooh stories and say, oh, that's just Milne being whimsical. But if you view Winnie the Pooh, published in 1926, and The House at Pooh Corner in 1928, through the eyes of a traumatized soldier, the story changes. It isn't just a cute story, it's a reconstruction. He was building a safe world where conflict is low stakes. In the 100-Acre Wood, nobody loses a leg. Nobody gets gassed. The worst thing that happens to you is you get stuck in a rabbit hole or a balloon pops. It was a direct therapeutic inversion of the trench experience. And then you have Tolkien. As many of you know, he was a second lieutenant. He participated in the Somme offensive of 1916, and he lost multiple best friends, members of his TCBS club, to the war. Tolkien famously hated allegory, as we've discussed on this channel before multiple times, but he admitted that an author cannot, of course, remain wholly unaffected by his life experience. For Tolkien, the war wasn't a subject to be reported on like a journalist, it was a catastrophe that had to be processed through myth. And this is where the two authors converge. They both engaged in what scholars call ironclad pastoralism. It was a common thing for British officers to carry a pastoral commitment into the war, holding onto memories of the English countryside as a mental shield against the horror of the machine guns. For Milne, this shield became the 100-Acre Wood. It's a hermetically sealed environment where the only dangers are imaginary heffalumps. For Tolkien, it became the Shire. The Shire is an agrarian ideal. It's a place of less noise and more green. Both men were performing an act of literary exorcism. They were using fantasy to process the impossible data of industrial warfare. This brings us to a specific theory that Tolkien wrote in his essay called On Fairy Stories. He argued that fantasy offers three essential gifts: recovery, escape, and consolation. And when you apply these to Winnie the Pooh, the parallels to Lord of the Rings become undeniable. First, recovery. Tolkien defined this as regaining a clear view of simple things. In the trenches, a wood was a shattered nightmare of splinters and shrapnel. In the Shire or the 100-Acre Wood, the concept of wood is recovered. It becomes a living, breathing, safe place again. Milne was recovering the childhood innocence the war had stolen from him. Tolkien was recovering a moral universe where individual action still mattered, unlike in the war where you were just a number. Second, there's escape. Tolkien famously clapped back at critics of escapism by saying they were confusing the escape of the prisoner with the flight of the deserter. He argued that the Shire and the Wood aren't places to hide, they are places you go to remember what normal looks like when the real world has gone mad. And finally, you have consolation. This is the eucatastrophe, the sudden joyous turn that denies universal defeat. Both authors used their worlds to process specific anxieties. For Tolkien, the Dead Marshes were a direct reflection of the corpse-laden battlefields of northern France. For Milne, the heffalumps and woozles represent a form of anxiety that is manageable. They are the unknown enemy, but in the book, they turn out to be harmless. It's a domestication of fear. So when critics say that Lord of the Rings is reverse-engineered from children's stories, they aren't necessarily wrong, they just miss the point. Both stories are attempts to rebuild a shattered worldview using the building blocks of innocence. Now let's talk about the characters, because if you look closely, the Fellowship of the Ring looks a lot like the residents of the 100-Acre Wood. Both narratives rely on a decentralized group of male friends. They display deep interdependence, anxiety, and a form of male intimacy that is a hallmark of British bromance literature. This isn't an accident. This is the platoon mentality. The most striking parallel is between the pairings of Pooh and Piglet and Frodo and Sam. Let's look at Pooh and Piglet first. Their friendship is defined by anxiety and reassurance. Piglet is a very small animal. He is constantly terrified, he sees heffalumps everywhere, he is the embodiment of fear. Pooh, on the other hand, is the anchor. He has very little brain, but that's his superpower. His optimism and his solid nature keep Piglet grounded. Piglet offers Pooh intellectual validation, he edits Pooh's poetry, but Pooh offers Piglet physical courage. They are incomplete without each other. Now look at Sam and Frodo. It's the same dynamic, just elevated to a life-or-death scale. Like Piglet, Sam is often driven by fear, initially of the outside world, but his devotion to his master overrides that terror. But here is where the psychological mapping gets a little interesting. In many ways, Frodo is actually the Piglet of the situation. Frodo carries the burden of anxiety and existential dread. The ring is the ultimate Heffalump. Frodo is the one who is wounded and weary. He is physically small in the face of immense danger. And Sam? Sam is Pooh. Sam provides the simple, earthy grounding. He worries about cooking, he recites poetry, he is optimistic when things look black. Just as Pooh's simple-mindedness protects him from overthinking, Sam's Hobbit sense protects him from the ring's temptation. Sam is the chief hero because, like Pooh, he sees the world simply. Both groups exhibit a form of love called agape, selfless brotherly love. Sam doesn't love the ring, he loves Frodo. That's why he says, "I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you." That is the ultimate expression of this dynamic. In Winnie the Pooh, this interdependence is the primary way they solve problems. When Pooh gets stuck in Rabbit's door, they don't shame him, they wait with him. Tigger needs Rabbit to organize him. Eeyore needs Pooh to notice him. It reflects the reality of a squad in the Great War. You survive because the guy next to you holds you up. This also explains the lack of female characters in the core groups. Pooh has Kanga, who is purely maternal. Lord of the Rings, within the Fellowship itself, is entirely male. This reflects the clubbability of the Inklings and the homosocial environments of the trenches. It's a space where men can be gentle with one another without the complications of potential romance. In Pooh, this is holding hands. In Lord of the Rings, it's Sam kissing Frodo's hand. It is masculine tenderness as a response to the hardness of war. The setting is the third pillar of this argument. The 100-Acre Wood and the Shire are not just backdrops, they are characters. Winnie the Pooh is anchored in the 500-acre wood of Ashdown Forest in Sussex. It's a landscape of ancient beech trees and gorse. It's a managed wilderness, wild enough for adventure, but you can always get home for tea. The Shire is anchored in the countryside of Tolkien's youth. It's an agrarian society of watermills and well-tilled fields. Both settings are enclosed gardens. In fact, the word paradise comes from the Old Persian for fenced place. The wood is enclosed by the imagination of the child. It's a safe bubble. The Shire is enclosed by the rangers and the magic of the Old Forest. It's a bubble of peace in a world of war. And maps play a huge role in both. You have the map of the 100-Acre Wood drawn by E.H. Shepard and the map of Middle-earth drawn by Christopher Tolkien. Both feature blank spaces that represent the unknown. In Pooh, the North Pole is a destination of discovery. In Lord of the Rings, the blank spaces are where the dragons live. Moorcock criticized this. He called it the Surrey of the mind, arguing that it teaches people to stay in the suburbs where it's safe. But within the context of the comfort fantasy, the Shire represents the moral baseline. In Pooh, the wood is the world as it should be. In Lord of the Rings, the Shire is the world as it used to be or is fighting to remain. The most profound link between Milne and Tolkien, and the reason that Lord of the Rings works as grown-up Pooh, is their shared rejection of the Nietzschean Übermensch. In the early 20th century, the philosophy of the Superman was gaining traction. The idea that a superior individual could transcend conventional morality to impose his will on the world. This eventually found its horrific distortion in Nazi ideology. The Superman creates his own values. He rejects the slave morality of kindness and humility. Tolkien and Milne looked at the Superman and said, no thanks. They fundamentally rejected the great man theory of history. Milne's heroes are stuffed toys. They're fragile. They're stitched together. They are fundamentally dependent on Christopher Robin. There is no power fantasy in Pooh, except maybe Tigger, and he's usually causing trouble. Pooh is pretty much the anti-Superman. He doesn't transcend morality, he embodies the simplest morality of kindness. Tolkien took this and turned it into a mythic struggle. Sauron is the ultimate Ubermensch. He is a being of pure will and order. He wants to reorganize the world according to his design. The ring is the temptation to become the Ubermensch, or the Superman. Instead of the Superman, though, both authors elevate the little person. The Hobbit is physically small. He prefers food to fighting. He is invisible to the wise. The bear of very little brain is defined by his limitations, yet he succeeds because of his purity of heart. This is the heroism of the ordinary. In the context of World War I, this was the, quote, Tommy, the average soldier who endured the worst of circumstances not for glory, but for his friends. The little man doesn't seek to change the world, he seeks to preserve his corner of it. Think about Frodo's victory. Frodo doesn't defeat Sauron through strength of arms. He doesn't outmagic the necromancer. He defeats him by enduring. It's a passive heroism of suffering. Now think about Pooh's wisdom. Pooh doesn't solve problems through logic like Rabbit or literacy like Owl. When they seek the North Pole, Pooh finds it not by calculation, but by accident and simple observation. It is important to distinguish this little man from the modern anti-hero, like Han Solo or Walter White. The little man isn't morally ambiguous or more so just morally wrong. He is morally absolute, but physically insignificant. The Ubermensch changes the world through will and power. The little man saves the world by refusing to change and refusing the power offered to him. Pooh is essentially a proto-Hobbit. His hum-hum-dee-dum is the precursor to the Hobbit walking song. It is the assertion of existence and joy in the face of a large, confusing world. So let's go back to Michael Moorcock. Was he right? Is The Lord of the Rings just Winnie the Pooh for adults and Winnie the Pooh, The Lord of the Rings for toddlers? The answer is yes. But it's not an insult. It's actually the highest compliment you could pay the foundational grammar of British post-war fantasy. Because if Lord of the Rings is Pooh for adults, it means that even in the face of Mordor, in the face of the atomic bomb, the concentration camp, and the mechanized slaughter of the 20th century, we refuse to let go of the nursery's wisdom. It's an admission that the values of the nursery, kindness, friendship, a warm fire, and a good pot of honey, aren't weak. They are the only things worth fighting for. They are the only things that can fight the great men of history who want to burn the world down. Ultimately, the Hobbit is just a grown-up Pooh Bear. He has lost some stuffing, he has gained a sword, he has seen the face of war and carried a burden no bear should ever have to carry. But his core desire is the same. He just wants to sit down before a fire with his friends. And in a world like ours, preserving that simple joy is the most heroic thing you could possibly do. The Lord of the Rings is indeed Winnie the Pooh for adults, because it suggests that the only way to defeat the necromancer is to remember the lessons of the nursery. And in the same way, Winnie the Pooh is the Lord of the Rings for toddlers. It prepares the smallest among us for the biggest of adventures, proving that you don't need a sword to be brave, sometimes you just need a friend. But what do you think? Do you agree with Michael Moorcock that this is all just a cowardly retreat, or do you agree that the Hobbit's connection to the nursery is actually its greatest strength? And which Pooh character do you think matches up best with each member of the Fellowship? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into mud and myth, be sure to like and subscribe, and check out the playlist for more Tolkien analysis. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.